So today is a very exciting day. I am thrilled to be here with Melanie Moore. Melanie is the fairly new inclusion and engagement leader at Honeywell, supporting global regions. Melanie, you have been going around the world doing such amazing work, and I can't wait for you to curate some of these golden nuggets that you've been sharing and learning. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me, Sheryl.
Of course. And so before we get into it and I start really picking your brain and hearing like what you've been teaching and hearing in China and
Mhm.
in the US and all over, I was wondering if you could share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah,
Was there a
absolutely.
person or a situation like what gives Melanie Moore so much magic and compassion about others and what helped you ascend to where you are today?
No, absolutely. And thank you again for having me on your podcast. I'm very excited to be here today. So, my career really, I had no plans into going into the human resources field. Like, that was not on my radar or my bingo card, right? Like, I had planned to go into the field of marketing. That's what I majored in college. And when I went to get an internship, I got hired by a shelter insurance company. And back then, they just placed you in what department they felt like you would be best for. And so they placed me in human resources. And, the first day I was like, wait, wait, wait. I don't know what human resources is. I'm the marketing girl. Like, I don't want to do that. And they were like, well, we really think you would be great at that. Just try it. If you don't like it, then we'll move you to marketing. And my mindset was like, okay, I'll try anything once and see what happens. And that's when I fell in love with the human resources field. So, stayed at shelter for my last 2 years of college, full time during the summer, part time during the school year. And that's really how I started my human resources career. And I have been in that field almost 30 years now. And most of my experience has been in the talent acquisition space. That's kind of where I found my sweet spot and found that I was just very happy with finding people jobs. That was just really satisfying for me as a career. And so I really grew my career in that space and have been in that talent acquisition space up until about 6 months ago, where I shifted into the inclusion and engagement space. I've always had my hand and my foot in diversity and inclusion and always partnered very closely with that function, but I'd never done a full-time role in that space. So it was just very exciting and new, and I was ready to try something different. So that's how I ended up in this role. And I've had many global roles prior to this one. So this just felt like a great transition for me to be able to do something new and be able to support various countries and regions outside of the US from the inclusion and engagement standpoint.
Yeah, I want to hit pause for a moment because
Mhm.
for anybody listening who's like, I'm passionate about this, but that's not where my degree is, or that's not where my experience is, or I've worked 20 years over here, but I'd like to try that, but I don't, all the buts and the waiting and whatever.
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm going to put words in your mouth, but I think you would say, just go for it. Is that
Just go for it. That is absolutely right. From my time in college where I didn't know what it was, but I was like, let me try it and see, and fell in love with it, to now, right? To now where I am in my career where I was like, let me try it, and I'm loving the space that I'm in. So I say, listen, it doesn't hurt to try something. If you don't like it, you can go back to where you're comfortable and what you know, but it doesn't hurt to try new things.
Yeah. No, I guess it's like, no regrets, I guess, and
Hmm.
I always say to people, pay attention to your heart and your gut before your head gets in the way and starts telling you a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And you seem to really practice that. In other words, I've been passionate about this. You kind of had your pulse in it. And it took a couple years, but now it's your full-blown career. And how amazing is that?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I
Thank
love
you.
the lesson in that too, because some people listening may be in a role that they like, but maybe there's something that they would love,
Mhm.
so think about kind of doing what you did and kind of have your hand in something like maybe like for a long time, before 6 months ago, you were not an inclusion and engagement leader, but you had your hand in it. You didn't give up.
Hmm.
So I love that, if there's something that you want to do to really kind of have your hand in it and keep it real
Hmm.
until it really, ends up showing up. You really have some agency in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, the title of this episode is a summary of the global inclusion summits that you've been to. So,
Mhm.
can you share a couple nuggets of wisdom that you gathered?
Yeah, absolutely. And, as I came into this role, one of the first things that I was tasked with was organizing, planning, and executing regional inclusion summits. So the thought is that historically we had only had the inclusion summits in the US, and we would invite a couple of people from every region to the US to participate and then expect those 2 to 3 people to then go disseminate it in their region, where sometimes those regions have, thousands of
Yep.
people, right? And so this year the thought is okay, why don't we go in region where we can impact more people, really get a feel for what's needed in that particular region and help them be able to strategize and execute. So we did summits in Europe, in India, in China, and in the US. So 4 summits over the past, it hasn't even been 6 months. Since June, since June to October, I've been all around the world and executing these inclusion summits. And for me, what I would say is that even though I had been connecting with these regions and hearing about some of the challenges that they face in region, there's nothing like experiencing it in person and really hearing from a variety of people from a variety of different countries. Like, so Europe, for example, we service 30 different countries in Europe. So we had a variety of people from a variety of countries that all have different challenges. Some of those locations might have challenges with women in the workplace, right? And the benefits offered in that particular country, where another region is like, oh no, 50% of our population is women. So it's good to be able to understand, hear, and try and solve for what's happening in that particular region. And really, it started with the inclusion councils and the employee networks that are in each of those regions. Now, some of them are very mature, right? Like most regions, women employee networks are mature, right? But then in other regions, when we think about all abilities, it might only have a handful of people that's a part of that, but it's still impactful because we know that, people of varying abilities need support too. So it's a matter of how we address the agenda and how we deliver content was based on the needs of that region. So there was a lot of preparation that went into each one of the summits to ensure that we were going to be able to deliver what was needed for those particular groups.
Okay, so this was not a cookie cutter world tour.
No, no, it
A lot of
wasn't at
work
all.
on the front end to understand what's needed. And don't you think even before you came with all of this amazing support and content and training, it seems like there's um the unspoken support of saying I care. Like it's one
Exactly.
thing to say, "Oh, you can send a couple people to the US." But when it comes to inclusion and engagement, to have you come and travel that far, even before you say anything, you are communicating that I care.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. And that's been the message that we've heard from every last region is that they were just grateful that we came, right? Like before we talked about anything, they were excited that we were coming. They were excited that they were thought about in that manner. And was came ready to learn, ready to engage, ready to develop their plans for next year. So it was a really great feeling that to know that just this what's considered small, right? Small notion of just let me go to India or let me go to Europe, let me go to China. They were extremely grateful.
Yeah, and let's talk a minute about ROI because a lot of people I'm going to try not to get myself in trouble. There are some leaders who can be just leaders out there who can be short-sighted. In other words, so when inclusion and engagement goes by the wayside because it's like, well, that's kind of a soft skill. It's not the sales, it's not the training, it's not that. But let's talk about the RI. Like, what was at stake or what would be lost if you didn't do this that some people might not be aware of?
Right. And I think the thing to keep in mind is that it goes broader than, diversity of gender or diversity of race. We're talking about well-being. We're talking about, just socialization as a whole. We're talking about engagement. We're talking, like all of those things outside of race and gender that's a part of these summits. So it's how do you feel safe at work? So we talked about psychological safety. We talked about, inclusion from a standpoint of, hey, what if you have introverts on your team and you've noticed that they never contribute in team meetings, but then they come back to you later one on one and with great ideas that nobody hears, right? How do you as a leader make sure that that person feels included in the moment and not after the fact? So it was broader than, race and gender. It really was tackling all things inclusion, well-being, psychological safety. How do you mature employee networks, right? Like it's all of those things combined that was a part of these summits.
Yeah, and I just kind of am curious, and I don't know if there's any way of measuring, but what innovations, ideas, and at the end of the
Mhm.
day, ROI in the near term and short term would be like slipping through our fingers if even if you just take psychological safety, because from a
Mhm.
research standpoint, at least from the lens that I look through and the research standpoint is that when emotions are heightened, productivity plummets. So if
Absolutely.
psychological safety isn't addressed, so maybe someone is like amazing and they can innovate, they have amazing ideas, they can manage projects, they are just incredible employee, but they are never given the safe space to
Mhm.
be who they are, then they're
That
devalued. It's to the
impacts.
company's
Mhm.
detriment. So I
Right.
love that so
No,
much. I also love
absolutely.
that you explained that this wasn't just a summit about gender and race.
Right.
Like so much
No,
more. And I think people make that assumption sometimes.
no, absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's always hard to measure things like inclusion, right? But one of the things that we look at is our engagement scores, right? So we have very specific questions around, you know, can I bring my do I feel like I can bring my full self to work on our engagement surveys? Do you feel like your leader cares about your well-being, right? All of those things tie into inclusion and engagement, and we can look at those scores and be able to see movement each year, as we do those engagement surveys. So those are the types of things that we look at, from our team's perspective on whether there's an ROI to the work that we're doing. This is just one slice of the puzzle, but this is still how we're looking at the ROI for these inclusion summits.
Yeah. And then what would you say? Well, it seems like it's a resounding yes. Um,
Mhm.
so what would you say to either a global company or maybe even a smaller company that's not global if they're listening and they're like, oh no, I never even thought about that. And or our company's here and we really have been kind of behind in this. What do you
Mhm.
think is most important to start laying this foundation of inclusion and engagement
Yeah.
kind of up level it for high performing teams?
Yeah, and I think the thing is it that gets overwhelming for organizations and departments alike is that they try and do too much too fast, right?
Yeah.
Start small. We didn't always do inclusion summits, in region, right? This is literally the first year we've been doing this, and we've been doing inclusion summits for the past 4 years, right? So this is, the fourth year we're like, okay, now let's go in region, right? So start small. You don't have to boil the ocean, right? That's it's
That's not a funny joke. No, I'm just
right, but
kidding.
like
Yeah.
start with something that's reasonable to that can make an impact. And so whether that's through, employee networks, whether that's through engagement or inclusion councils, whether it's a specific business that kicks it off and once they've gotten their strategy built, then it can spread wider, to other parts of other divisions of your organization. Start small, master it small, build, have that strategy, airtight, and then spread that out. Right, for us, we're really looking at how do we drive inclusion further down into the ecosystem, and these inclusion summits were a way for us to do that. Right, because in all the previous years, it was almost getting to a point where it was the same people that was always coming to the summits. And so it was like, okay, well, we know these people are doing the work, but what about everybody else? Like, how do we get the messaging outside of the group that we know is doing it really well? And so this was one of the ways that we decided to do that. And we've got nothing but positive responses. Of course, we did a survey at the end of each summit to get feedback on what we can do differently and how overall satisfaction of the summit was. And literally on a 5-point scale, our overall satisfaction was 4.7 or higher for each summit. So it was, that tells us that one, people valued having that type of event. They found it useful. They found information that they're going to take back and utilize with their teams. My group in Asia Pacific, they have already, after coming to the summit in Europe, now they've already done a summit just in Pacific, right? And so
Wow.
they put on their own. They used the materials that we provided to them, and during the summit that they came to, and now they have ingrained that and did another summit with more people and presented the same content. And that's driving it further down into the ecosystem.
That's so amazing. And I was thinking as you were talking of a connection. So when you drive engagement, it almost creates kinship. In other words, like you're part of something together. And like if
Mhm,
I, for example, if I understand you as a person and we have something that we understand about each other and we feel safe, we start to feel what Daniel Pink calls kinship, and which also creates some sense of obligation.
mhm.
And so it just seems like all of this work where people can get to know themselves and each other a little better and feel cared for, that it creates this almost sense of obligation to do their best because they feel connected to their company
Mhm.
rather than just someone on the outside who just has a to-do list.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And that ties back into the psychological safety, being able to bring your whole self to work and how that translates into production, right? Like if I feel safe at work, if I feel like I can be myself, then I'm going to be more productive. And then of course that impacts the bottom line of that organization.
Yeah. So that's so amazing. So what would you say to someone who's listening and they're like, I'm gonna do what Melanie did, or or
Mhm.
I want to, even whether it's on the same scale or even a smaller scale, what is the sell to the leadership? In other
Yeah,
words, what like I've learned in my years studying influence that we need to speak in other people's language. And a
no,
lot of times,
absolutely.
other people's language isn't necessarily our language. So, what would you advise the person who's working for a company who thinks that there's some room for improvement here,
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
to, move something like this forward?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things. So one, I had categories of things that were going to be standard across all summits. Okay. So for example, I had a set of learning sessions. So these are ones where we were strictly teaching people something related to inclusion and engagement. Okay. Now, that could have been different learning series for different regions, right? Like every region was in a different place. So I might have had different sessions for those, but there was learning categories. So whether I was going to teach you about the maturity model, whether I was going to teach you about the idea lens, whether I was going to, like whatever the topic was, I
Mhm.
had a category of learning. Then I had a category of sessions that was really related to helping them build out their strategy for their regions, right? So again, that could vary a little bit by region depending on how mature their councils and networks were, but you were going to leave there with your plan for 2026, right? Like, here's what you're going to do differently to continue to have engagement within your region, based off of what you've learned in the summit.
Mhm.
Then there was also a session that was related to the business. So within Honeywell, there's a model that we use that translated on our engagement survey very low understanding of that model. So what I did was is I tied that in. I was like, okay, at every session, we're going to offer a training session on our model. So then that way people will understand it better. And then our engagement scores will go up on that particular question about, do you understand this model? And so the combination of all those things, right? Like there was a business aspect of it, there was a learning aspect, and then there was a strategic aspect. So that was the way I was able to get it sold to our CEO and our CHRO to be able to get the funding to be able to do this around the world.
Mhm. Oh, I hope if you weren't taking notes, hit replay the last few minutes. Okay, well, let's kind of, so that was kind of the bigger scale. If someone's eyes are
Mhm.
this big and they're gonna be like, if Melanie can do it, I can do it.
All
So that
right.
you get started. But let's say for someone listening, I mean, that takes time. What you were talking about is a campaign, and it is an amazing campaign, but it seems like it's an internal campaign before it gets to be an external campaign. And so while that ball is rolling, what is something that employees can do immediately? Meaning, if we are employees and we want to increase our own psychological safety or feeling of inclusivity, do you
Yeah.
have any advice that people can take and start to use immediately?
No, absolutely. And thank you for that question. And for me, I think the easiest thing to do is to get involved. Find something that your company offers that you have an interest in, that you want to learn more about, or that you're passionate about. So for me, I've always, at every organization, I've gotten immediately involved in employee networks. So not just, me as a Black person getting involved in the Black employee network. I joined all the networks because I feel like there's something that I can learn or offer. So you can't just think about it like, let me just find a group that is just like me, because then you're not being inclusive, right? You're being exclusive,
That
okay?
is a really great reminder that
Yes.
I'm sure a lot of people don't think about.
Right, right. So, and of course, join the group that is like you, right? Like that's where you will feel that psychological safety. But also join other groups where you can learn something about someone's race, heritage, beliefs, whatever the case may be. Um, but you can also still offer some skills that way too, right? Like you can learn and develop and become a part of that group, and then that expands your network. A lot of times, some of the pushback that I get from employees when I'm encouraging them to join employee networks is, oh, I'm busy, I have so much work, and like I have too many things on my plate, I don't have time to join an employee network. You're always going to have a lot of things on your plate, right? It's a
Mhm.
matter of, okay, can I take my lunch period, right? Like one of the things that a lot of our employee networks do is they'll hold lunch and learns. It's okay to take a lunch break once a month, join an employee network event to hear what's happening, right? One of the events that we do at Honeywell with one of the networks is called Wholeness Wednesdays. And they do it over the lunch hour, and there's some sort of speaker, there's professional development, there's something where it can just help you feel good, right? Like, so whatever that topic is, and you just take your lunch to that conference room or on that Teams call and participate that way. And just I found that just doing just those little things, even if it's, like you don't normally take a lunch break, you eat while you work, whatever the case may be, you can take once a week,
Mhm,
a lunch break that doesn't involve you working while you're eating and taking some time for yourself to learn, develop, grow.
mhm. I love that. Melanie said you can take a break. But you don't need Melanie's permission. Give yourself
Right. Give
permission
yourself
once
permission.
once a week, once a month. And I love that reminder. Join a group where you can add value that maybe people look or sound a little different than
Mhm.
you. I love that so much. Well, so you've shared so much with us. What is your, besides taking that time, is there any other call to action or parting words that you'd like to leave with the audience?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the biggest thing is knowing that no matter your level, no matter where you're at in your career, there's always still opportunity to learn and being very diligent, just being very conscious of that, that there are experts all around you. So it's okay to not know the answer to something, to lean on somebody and their expertise and use that to be able to continue to learn and grow, right? One of the things that all of my leaders have told me throughout the years is that, I'm just very organized when it comes to a project. So they know if they put me on a project, I'm gonna have a full-blown project
Yeah.
plan with drop downs, like timelines, and I'm gonna get it done and I'm not gonna miss anything, right? And people say to me all the time, like, gosh, I wish I could learn how to be like you when it comes to those things. And I'm like, well, now it's easy, right? When you got Chat GBT and Copilot and things, right? Like, I'm like, hey, create a project plan with these drop downs, right? But
No excuses anymore.
no excuses anymore, right? But if you know that there's somebody in your workplace or someone in your circle, someone in the network that has a skill set that you're interested in, don't be afraid to reach out. Most of the time, when people reach out to you, you reach out to people, they're excited to share their knowledge, right? So take the time, get to meet someone new every week, say hello to someone in the hallway in passing that you may not know because you never know what skill they may be able to offer you, what advice they might be able to offer you. Use everything as an opportunity to learn. In the building I work in here in Atlanta, everybody knows me because I talk to everybody. Because one, I don't know when I might need you,
Yeah.
right? So
But also too, it's not just that, like they're not gonna know when they might need you.
exactly,
And I love that so much. So everybody's
exactly.
like, hey Melanie.
Yeah. Like literally, as I'm walking in, I can barely get in the door good. And there's people, hey Melanie, hey, hey. And I'm like, sometimes it's 7 a.m. and I'm like not fully awake yet, right? But it's great to have a broad network that will continue to help you, whether it's in your career, whether it's personally. Like my son plays soccer. I talk to all those moms, I talk to the coach. What can I do? How can I help? Right? Because you just never know when you might need that person or they might need you.
Yeah, I love that so much. So hopefully challenge is accepted by everybody listening. Meet somebody new every day. That can be in your company. It could also be in general. I love that so
Hmm.
much. And to join a group that
Join a group.
maybe where everyone doesn't look and think like you. So
Hmm.
those are doable. We can do that. I don't know about you listening, but I'm writing those things down and I'm going to share it with my husband, which will ensure that it happens. Once you start talking about it,
Right.
it's going to
It
happen.
gets done. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Melanie, thank you so much for your time, to your continued success, and I look forward to following your journey.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course.